welcome back. This is our first example of mass to mass conversions in stoichiometry. Let's get started. So in this question, it says we've got some powdered zinc metal. Well, that's fun. And it apparently reacts violently with sulfur. It does. It actually releases a lot of heat, a lot of light. Looks quite hellish. Reacts with sulfur when heated to produce zinc sulfide. And the question is asking, predict the mass of sulfur required to react with 20 grams of zinc. This is a very common thing that happens in chemistry labs where you want to run a reaction and we've got maybe 2 reactants and we need to determine how much we need of each reactant to successfully run a reaction. Very, very common. Now, because we can't measure moles directly using a balance, we have to go through an indirect method. We have to measure its mass first, and then we figure out moles. Mass is a very applicable measurement because we can measure it in the lab, and it's quite easy to convert between mass and moles, as I'm sure you can recall. We just use something called molar mass. Anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Let's rein it back in and let's walk through how to solve this type of question. So it says that powdered zinc metal reacts violently with sulfur. The first thing we actually really need to do is write down a balanced chemical equation. So I'm going to get started and I'm going to highlight a few things for you, or rather I should say outline. I don't have my highlighter here today. Powdered zinc metal. What is that? Here's a hint. Anytime it says zinc metal or something metal or a powder or, there's nothing else going on here, it's just the zinc, that means it is literally just the zinc. So we can write it as its naturally occurring form, which is just zinc atoms. And it's in the solid state. Zinc is solid at room temperature, and we can assume this is, well, we don't really know what temperature this is occurring. It's going to be really, really hot because you need put some measure of energy into this reaction before it gets going. But anyway, there we go. We got zinc, solid, and it's reacting with sulfur, also a solid. Looks nice and yellow. Smells horrible. So we have zinc plus sulfur, and it's S8. So the 8 there just means that naturally occurring sulfur can exist as 8 sulfur atoms bonded together in a small kind of network. So zinc plus sulfur, and they make, what do they make? Zinc sulfide. So I'm going to write out the formula for zinc sulfide. There we go. So we've written our equation. That's the first thing you should do. And then next thing we need to do is balance it. And what do we need to do to balance this? Well, I've got 8 sulfurs on the left. I need to have 8 on the right. So I put an 8 there. And that means I need to have 8 zincs. 8 zinc atoms. Now, the nice thing with stoichiometry is that instead of talking about atoms or molecules, we can actually scale it up quite a bit, and we can recognize that these coefficients refer to moles also, because a mole is just a very large group of particles. So we could say here that we have 8 moles of zinc plus 1 mole of sulfur is required to make 8 moles of zinc sulfide. So the mole ratio here, or for the whole reaction, is 8 to 1 to 8. So it's an 8 to 1 to 8 mole ratio. Now, the question's not asking us to predict how many moles of sulfur are required to react with certain moles of zinc. We're dealing with masses. And all we know is that for zinc, we have a mass. We use little m to represent mass. We have a mass of 20 grams. Now, I can't just take mass and plug in these mole ratios to deal with the mass to convert directly between mass. Remember, because these are mole ratios, we can only use them to convert between moles. So what I need to do with my mass is actually convert it into moles of zinc. And I can do that by taking the molar mass of zinc. And the molar mass of zinc is 65.41 grams per mole. So my number of moles of zinc will equal 20 grams divided by 65.41 grams per mole. And we're going to get some number out of there, which will become our moles of zinc. I was an idiot and I forgot to get my calculator. So maybe while I run and go get it, this is embarrassing, you can figure this out, and I'll be back in a few seconds. All right, I'm back. And the calculator's back too. Look at that. Okay. So, number of moles of zinc is 20 over 65.41. And that gives us roughly 0.30, let's just say 0.31. I'm going to just keep it as a reference here. Remember, don't round until you get to your final answer. These are really just references for the video to kind of show you that this is the step we're using to take, but keep this number in your calculator, because we're not gonna round to sig digs till we get to our final answer. All right, so that's our moles of zinc. Now what we're asked for the mass of sulfur. So the question is, how much sulfur do I need? So I need to take these moles of zinc and figure out how much sulfur would I need to react with the zinc. Well, my mole ratio states that for 8 moles of zinc, if I have 8 moles of zinc, I need 1 mole of sulfur to completely react with it. Remember, this is what we get from our balanced chemical equation. 8 moles of zinc require 1 mole of sulfur to make zinc sulfide. For the equation of balance, we need these coefficients, and the coefficients represent the mole ratios. So my number of moles of zinc was roughly 0.31 moles. My number of moles of sulfur required, equal my number of moles of zinc times the mole ratio. And the mole ratio is 1 mole of sulfur per 8 moles of zinc. So in effect, what we're doing is we're dividing however many moles of zinc by 8. And maybe pause the video here just to see why that makes sense. So how many moles of zinc do we need? Sorry, how many moles of sulfur do we need? We take that moles of zinc divided by 8, and we get 0.038 moles. Once again, we're not going to keep this rounded number. We're going to use all our digits until we get to our final answer. because we're not done yet. We need to figure out the mass of sulfur. How much sulfur do we need? So we could say the mass of sulfur equals the moles of sulfur times the molar mass of sulfur. So what is that going to be? My mass of sulfur equals, well, I'll write moles of sulfur like that. And my molar mass of sulfur would be 32.07 times 8. So we have 8 of those atoms. So it would be 256.56 grams per mole. So find our moles of sulfur, multiply by the molar mass of sulfur, and I'm going to multiply it by this number up here. Sorry, that number right there. And we get an answer of 9.8. I think I need to have 2 significant digits. I do. So we get an answer of 9.8. What's my unit here? It's going to be grams. So that means if I'm running this reaction with 20 grams of zinc, that means I need to use 9.8 grams of sulfur to completely consume that zinc. All right, so that's it for this first example. This kind of little horseshoe pattern is one I used quite a lot when I was doing these problems in high school. A lot of stoichiometry questions work this way, where you start with your given quantities and you kind of work your way down to figuring out how many moles you have of that chemical. And then what I usually do visually is I show that once I work my way down to my moles, I can do my mole conversion to the moles of the other thing I need to find, and then I work my way back up. Kind of been a habit of mine ever since I did this in high school. If you like it, great. Give me a thumbs up. If not, well, that's just tough. I might try to I'll write it out differently for those of you that have a problem with horseshoes. Anyway, see you in the next video.